As we've seen from last week, everyone definitely needs a lot more practice flowing. So we're gonna do another flowing drill today. So please take out a piece of paper and then a pen, and then I'm gonna read a case to y'all. Let's see. Wow, this was. Let me see.
I also have a couple cases that I could read, but they're like pretty, I guess, information heavy.
Pretty fast, and no, I have a case. I was just counting how many words. Okay, does everyone have a paper and a pen? And I'm gonna ask y'all to send pictures again, so please.
Can you hold for one more minute? Sorry.
Yeah, we can wait.
Okay, I think I'm ready.
All right. Is everyone else ready? Okay, then I'm gonna start my case. Starting now. My partner and I negate the resolution that the U.S. federal government should impose price controls on the pharmaceutical industry. Contention 1 is decreased market entry. Subpoint A is innovation. Jarvis 19 articulates the U.S. is innovating more productively as the last 3 years of drug innovation alone have been more productive than the last 2 decades. In the midst of this innovation boom is a small biotech boom. Robinson 20 outlines that 63% of new innovative drugs are created in small biotech labs. However, Sham 14 writes that small labs rely on investors seeking a massive profit to fund their initial drug creations. Problematically, Medicare for All would impose price regulations, killing investor confidence. Lovelace 19 finds that price controls would eliminate the incentive for investors to make huge initial investments. Nysen 15 corroborates that biotech investors fear pricing pressure the most because it adds risk and removes the ability to adjust prices so investors get paid. As a result, Cliff 18 concludes that reducing investment directly correlates with less innovation in life-saving drugs. Small labs are unable to finance innovative research and collapse before they can bring drugs to the market. Overall, Vernon 03 finds that price regulations would kill 70% of the industry's drug innovation output. The impact is lives, as Sachs 14 finds that diseases inevitably mutate to become drug resistant within years, rendering past treatments ineffective. As such, treatments must be constantly innovated to keep death tolls down. Small biotech is critical as McKenna 19 finds that 90% of companies doing drug-resistant disease innovation are small biotech firms. Unfortunately, Friedman 20 finds without new treatments, the death toll of drug-resistant diseases would reach 10 million per year by 2050. Subpoint B is negotiations. Price controls will decrease market entry due to long negotiation times. Capitol Hill 17 writes that price controls lead to drawn-out negotiations between the government and pharma companies. In America, the average medicine is approved 90 days quicker than in Europe and about a year quicker than in Canada. The European Union's 2017 data reports that 600,000 deaths occur in Europe alone because of this wasted negotiation time, as well as decreased market entry. The University of California explains that price negotiations decrease market entry by nearly 53% in the developed countries where they were implemented, thus costing hundreds of thousands of lives and dramatically decreasing market entry in the pharma industry. Contention 2 is generic drug shortages. If the government artificially implements price reductions in a product, pharmaceutical companies will earn less profit and will produce less of the drug, thereby leading to a drug shortage. First, according to the Rockpoint 8 Group 19, the number of suppliers of generic drugs has dwindled to only 6. By implementing price controls, we will decrease the number of suppliers even more, putting everyone at risk of shortages. According to the NIH 11, economic pressure on manufacturers can also lead them to maintain lower inventories of low-profit drugs or take them off the market. For example, in 2000, a shortage of diphtheria occurred when one of the manufacturers discontinued these products because of low revenues. Generic drug manufacturers only make profit margins of 6% currently, so implementing price controls will reduce that tiny margin to nothing, forcing generic companies back out of the business. This is especially devastating because 88% of prescription drugs are made up of generics. Furthermore, drug shortages can result in serious health concerns, as according to the Business Insider in 18, prescription drug shortages can cause health systems to use less effective drugs as substitutions or reduce doses and reserve supply for only those in emergent need. According to a national study by ISMP 18, 94% of respondents reported rationing or restricting drugs to ensure supply. Most hospitals were affected by at least one drug shortage daily. Price controls will only lead to more drug shortages, and those drug shortages have adverse effects on the health of patients. Thus, we are proud to negate. Okay, that was like a really bad case and a really bad reading because like we wrote this in freshman year, but anyways. Yeah, please send pictures of your flow in the chat so we can look at those. Let me grab a bottle of water. I'll be right back.
Is it alright if you do another one because I wasn't able to catch like a whole lot of that.
Yeah, we're definitely able to do like more of them.
Yeah, we can do another one after this, but whatever you have right now, just please put it in the chat. Even if you like didn't get all of it down right, it's just like whatever you have. Because this is just practice. It's not like you're not gonna fail. Daniel, were you flowing?
Yes.
Oh, can you put yours in the chat as an example?
Okay, my flow is actually not very good. I was kind of like, I don't think I flowed like the second half of the first contention, but
okay, that's fine.
But I got most of it. Plus, it's also like it wasn't like an actual round, so it looks really terrible. It's really.
Oh, okay, Ethan. Look at how long this is now. It's like half the page. Okay, sorry. I was trying to click on the chat button, and then I just left. Did not mean that. Let's see. I mean, it looks good, but it's very blurry. Decreasing market entry, yes. Killing investor confidence, 7% drug output. Post treatments, nothing new. Drugs needed, yes. Negotiations. 700 deaths because of negotiations, okay. Drug shortage, generic. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's pretty good flow from Ethan. I would just say that like one thing that I would suggest is like some of the numbers you got like slightly wrong. Like you wrote 7% instead of like 70%. And then instead of 700,000 deaths, you wrote 700 deaths. So that's like a pretty big difference in the number. Okay, sorry, I keep doing that, but I'm just trying to click the picture so I can talk to you. And then like it, okay, anyways. Yeah, we get it. Just,
I crossed out what I wrote, so but I promise I'll flow the next one, even if it sucks.
Okay. Right. If we look at Daniel's, it's like pretty good.
It's like kind of
really
unreadable.
Read the handwriting, but like if you read it yourself, it's fine. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know what I'm not a good flower. Like I never flow things so that other people can read them. I flow it so that I know what's going on. Yeah. And usually I'll like, if it's an actual round, I put like dashes before each point instead of actually just flowing it like straight down as a paragraph. But like, you know, it wasn't.
Wait, Daniel,
so I kind of just got everything.
If you check your messenger, I'm sending you a link, and then can you read the case, and then I'll flow it as an example.
Yeah,
read
that's probably
case because I just read the neg one, and read it slowly, like
I will. I've been practicing my lay debate for nat quals, so.
Nice. All right, let's hear it.
Okay.
Is everyone ready for Daniel's speech?
No.
Okay, let's give them a second.
Yeah, just like holler if I'm going significantly faster.
For John Gunn, just take out a paper and then a pen because we're doing a flowing drill right now. So yeah, try to get as much as you can because we're gonna like send pictures of our flows in the chat.
I love all the comments from like 2018 on here.
Wait, you can see them?
Yeah.
Oh, on the doc, yeah.
Yeah, on the doc.
All right, is everyone ready now?
Yeah.
All right, Daniel, take it away.
Cool. Again, let me know if I'm going like too fast. Pro case. We affirm the United States federal government should impose price controls on the pharmaceutical industry. We define price controls as a price ceiling. Contention 1 is industry domination. The current high prices of the pharmaceutical industry help perpetuate the dominance of current titans in the drug market. By allowing them to operate at massive profit margins, these industries' Goliaths cloud out the competition by buying out competition and aggressively expanding. Mergers are when companies buy other companies. The American pharmaceutical industry sees more merger and acquisition activity than any other industry, both in the number of deals and the amount of money spent. These mergers also dramatically increasing in frequency, especially among generic drug companies. According to the NCBI, in 2016, almost $2 trillion were spent on mergers by generic companies alone. According to Fortune 15, generic companies fund their acquisitions with debt. Rates and drug prices go up following a merger. Price controls solve for mergers by rendering large companies unable to. Okay, sure. Price controls solve for mergers by rendering large companies unable to raise drug prices on patients in order to regain the cost of mergers. Furthermore, by decreasing revenue, we are decreasing the excess profits that companies make, so they can't acquire other companies. Global Health 18 cites that several potential reasons for pharmaceutical companies pursuing mergers, including gaining corporate control over an industry sector and buying out financially weak companies. This means that companies pursue mergers in order to gain more market share of a drug, resulting in industry monopolies. According to Becker from the University of Norwegian Economics, price regulations would decrease their market share of these monopolies by 37%. In the status quo, this industry domination is decreasing innovation in 3 ways. As of now, the current boom in mergers is decreasing the number of companies in the industry by a drastic amount, resulting in what we see as a relatively non-competitive landscape, which can be made more dynamic through a reduction of mergers. NCBI 17 notes that several companies make industry sectors less competitive by cornering generic markets through mergers and acquisitions in order to substantially increase prices for numerous life-saving drugs. According to Harvard Business Review, innovation in the pharma industry is encouraged by more competition, which is made difficult with the current boom of mergers, but will be increasing in the app. Secondly, according to the Brookings Institute in 2017, the monopolistic setup of pharmaceutical industries makes for a high barrier of entry for emerging companies in the drug sector, thus discouraging new potential entries for drug companies into the market. Thirdly, aggressive expansion by pharmaceutical companies eats into money spent on innovation. Harvard Business Review 17 finds that merged companies have on average worse innovative output due to reductions in the R&D budget, while new evidence shows that merging companies' competitors also spend less on R&D after the merger. Hence, industry competition and innovation become less dynamic overall. By reducing the industry monopolies through price controls, we will increase innovation beyond a point that the status quo can offer. Contention 2 is accessibility. Due to the high drug prices, many Americans choose to skip prescription doses. According to Prescription Justice 17, 45 million Americans didn't fill out or complete a prescription due to the high drug prices, an increase of around 10 million since 2014. Drugs have been released for decades and are life-saving and necessary, such as, I have no idea how to pronounce these. These have seen price hikes in the thousands of percents. Such price hikes are both outrageous and unreasonable. According to Brookings Institute 17, prices of drugs are rising by about 6.3%. Comparably, wages are growing at a rate of 2.8%. Orphan drugs, which make up 47% of the pharmaceutical market, exhibit clear signs of price gouging, where drug companies overcharge patients for drugs that could save their lives. According to the Health Affairs Journal, most orphan drugs are priced at the hundreds of thousands of dollars per patient, making it difficult to afford all of them. Right now, Drugs are already unaffordable to so many American citizens, but as prices keep rising and rising, only more people are going to be struggling to pay them. According to the FDA, not taking drugs as prescribed causes 30 to 50% of chronic disease treatment failures and 125,000 deaths per year. Inability to afford drugs will result in 4 million deaths every 30 years. The pharmaceutical industry as a whole will see more competition and innovative output under price controls while saving millions of lives. Thus, we affirm. Should I read contention 3, or this seems like very less formatted?
No, contention 3, we never read it, so.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
All
sorry for
right.
going too fast at the start. That's my bad.
It's okay. I forgot what was here.
Yeah, Ethan, it's okay if you run out of space. One trick is to flip the page over and just flow on the back. But normally when people read an AF, I just like keep 2 pages because I usually flow it on 2 different pages.
All right, everyone, please put your picture in the chat. Do that too.
I would sometimes like write like something, and then I would hear like a statistic, and then I'd write it down, then I'd figure out like what the statistic was all about. So then I would just kind of write the statistic.
Just do whatever you have. But
yeah,
I would like recommend that like there might be statistics, and then like Daniel might be onto something else as you're writing the current statistic. What I would say is like if it's not important, like if it's like the $7 trillion or was it $2 trillion spent on mergers, like that's not really important. So you could just skip that. If there's like something about like price controls decrease monopolies by X%, that's probably the more important thing to go with.
Yeah, and I think that generally, like, listening to the story of the AF is a lot more important than, like, the kind of specifics or the impacts of the AF. Because generally, when you read responses, it's not going to be like, oh, they say 10 million, but it's not actually 10 million. Like, that's probably the weakest type of response you could make. Instead, you're going to be kind of refuting their contention story as a whole, rather than focusing in on the small, minute details. So I would, like, listen for the story. If you don't get statistics, that's, like, completely fine, because those are, like, the least relevant part, generally. I'm not sure about public forum, but at least in LD, that's definitely how it works.
Yeah, it's better. It's definitely better to like get the link story than like the certain numbers. But at the same time, like you really want to go for like as much detail as you can, because a lot of people like make up their evidence, right? They go like 10 million people die in like 5 years, and like that's pretty sus. So like if you don't listen and you're just like, oh, 10 people die every 5 years, yeah, that makes sense. And then like in Final Focus, they were like 10 million people die, Judge. Like we win the entire round. Like so you have to like call for the evidence, right? So that's why it's important to pay more attention to their case. But of course, if you're a good debater, like probably don't need to pay as much. But right now, we want to get to best practice. So the more detail that you can put in, the better.
Yeah, definitely the more detail, the better.
Are both columns like? Oh, never mind. Okay, so this one, industry domination, trillion, unable to raise prices. Yeah. That's good. That's good. And then accessibility, no prescription, no life-saving drugs. Yeah, it's pretty good. And then Juliana's perceptual dominance. Mergers and acquisitions. Revenue decrease. Record. Yeah, those look pretty good. Also what I would recommend is like when you're flowing, like in the case, they're like, there are 3 reasons why monopolies decrease innovation or something like that, right? Like Dano said that sentence. And then that's when you know you're probably going to start like numbering, right? Like 1. And they might not like name like the first reason is because of competition. And then they explain it. Like they might not explain it, but like Daniel did go like first NCBI 17 fines or like whatever. And then like second Brookings 17 fines, right? So you can kind of like number them, and it makes it the links of like the different links to innovation from mergers and acquisitions easier. So numbering would be helpful. And then I think it would also be helpful for y'all if y'all could like make the card name a little bit different somehow. Because when you're looking at your flows right now, right, you might write like Brecker, but like when you look at it right away, you might not be sure like if that's a card name or like part of the argument if you're not like reading closely, right? So if there's something you could do to like what I do is I box it, like not really box the whole thing. I just like put like a square edge to make it clear that it's a card name. Wow, William, you seem really happy today. That's a lot of ha-ha-ha's. Oh, it's oh. Were you like, I don't know. Okay, yeah. Good job to y'all though. Okay. So next, what we're gonna do is a weighing drill, and so let's just review last week's PowerPoint for weighing again, and then we're getting on to the drill. Let me share my screen. Okay, so once again, talking about weighing. Weighing usually starts in summary. You probably want it to start in summary. Like in final focus, it's a little bit late. And in rebuttal would actually be like the best place to start weighing if you have time, because like you might think like, oh, isn't rebuttal like about refuting their case and protecting your case? But sometimes if you're like the first speaking team and you're giving your first rebuttal, and maybe you went through the whole case and you still have some time left, you can go back on your case and then explain like, oh, why does winning this one contention win me the entire round? So once again, going over the different types of weighing, the first big one is magnitude. And under magnitude, we have scope weighing, which is like I affect a greater amount of people than you do, right? So let's say you only affect people in America, but I affect people across the world. So I have like 3 countries whereas you only have 1, so you should vote for my argument. The second one is magnitude. This one is in terms of like numbers of people, right? So like you have 1 million deaths, but I have 2 million deaths, so I'm winning, right? And the thing, like, you might be like, okay, so what's the difference between like scope and magnitude? Although the definitions for everyone is different, the way that I use it is scope can have like 2 different impacts, right? So you can be talking about like, you know, one person might be talking about a war impact, and you might be talking about like if they can't get drugs, like they'll die. So like maybe a death impact, right? So one person could argue that the scope of a war is much bigger because, you know, if there's a war between like 2 different countries, that's like the people in 2 different countries. And then if there's, you know, versus like yours, if it's just people can't afford drugs in America, that's just like 1 country. So on scope, it's probably less. But on magnitude, usually it's like the same impact, right? Like, oh, you have deaths, but I have more deaths. I have 3 million and you only have 1 million. And then severity is like how bad it is, right? So this is how you can weigh different impacts. So like, let's say they have a war and then you have like an economic shock, like a recession maybe, right? You can argue that the severity of a war is worse because like in war, I don't know, there's like genocide and torture and, you know, like murders and like a bunch of deaths versus like a recession, which is kind of like, oh, some people fall into poverty, but like not necessarily a bunch of people dying.
Yeah, they're not like getting shot or anything sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes. And then on time frame, so there's 2 like ways to weigh time frame, right? So the first, let's talk about long term versus short term. So generally most judges default to long term just because like, you know, everyone likes thinking like, oh, in the long term, this will be a good investment for my stock money or something. But in the long term, you can weigh things like if they say like, oh, there's going to be like an increase in the economy by like $1 trillion, which will like lift people out of poverty. Okay. The AF might argue, or like your opponents might argue, okay, but in the long term, you're actually like making the government debt a lot worse. And when we default on our debt, like we're gonna fall into a recession. So you might be lifting people out of the short term, but in the long term, you push more people into poverty. So you should prefer long term over short term impacts, right? But you can also weigh like short term over long term, right? You can be like, oh, my impact happens first. It's the most immediate. That's why you should be looking to my impact, right? Like, let's say they're talking about a like climate change, which kills all of us in like 200 years, right? Versus your impact, which is like a war right now, like maybe in 1 year that could kill millions of people, right? You can be like, okay, we should be focusing on my war first before their impact because we have like 200 years to figure out how to stop like climate change, and there's so many things that can happen in the middle that like you don't know if their impact is really going to stand, but you know mine is going to happen in 1 year, and like we have a very short time frame for actually solving that, so we should prioritize mine first even if you care about their impact. The second way is like my short-term impact like prereqs or short circuits their impact, right? So like if mine happens first, so let's say their impact is like improving the economy and lifting 100 million people out of poverty, and my impact is like a war, and maybe I don't impact 100 million people, I impact like 1 million people die, right? So on scope, you know, if we're looking to the economy is probably going to win, but you can say my short-term impact will prereq their impact, because if my war happens first, there's no way that our economy is going to be good, because you know during wars trade decreases, you know, like you're just destroying a lot of the infrastructure and like no investor confidence, right? So if my war happens, then your impact never materializes of like this economic growth. So that's the way that you could use your argument to prerequisite their argument, right? Like if mine doesn't happen, yours doesn't happen either.
Wait, I think there's two more on time frame that I guess like maybe less applicable to PF, but they're definitely applicable in LD. The first one is cyclicality. So like the idea of whether an impact can happen multiple times or just once. So like for example, someone dying happens one time, right? They die once, whereas poverty can be like cross-generational, for example. So it keeps happening over and over again to multiple people, or things like structural violence as well are generally cyclical impacts. So they happen like repeatedly if they're not solved for, whereas, you know, if someone dies, it only doesn't get solved for once. So you can obviously outweigh cyclical impacts towards maybe other impacts that are immediate but have like more severity. So like, for example, someone dying is generally considered to be worse than falling into poverty. But you can say that someone falling into poverty, it's not just one person, but it happens across generations and it's cemented almost permanently, which I think leads kind of to the second other time frame weighing, which is reversibility. So like you can weigh non-reversible impacts against reversible impacts. So like, for example, like something like death is not reversible. Like you can't like bring someone back from the dead, whereas something like poverty is a reversible impact. You know, in the future, we can bring people out of poverty. Poverty isn't something that like happens, but when someone like, it's not something that's like permanent, right? Whereas when someone dies, they're dead, you know, can't bring them back. So that's another way of weighing, because it's obviously worse to have an irreversible impact rather than something that we can just fix in the future.
Yes, what Daniel said. I forgot about those, but thank God Daniel is here. And then also to add on to prereq weighing, so I just talked about like short term, right? If my impact happens first, your impact doesn't happen. But there's also like long term prereq. So like if we look at things like you know, if they say they're solving for like poverty, maybe, right? They're like, we can lift like 10 million people from Hawaii out of poverty. You can be like, okay, but if we don't solve like this long-term impact, this like climate change, in the end, you're really just going to see that they're going to be all pushed back into poverty, right? So you have to solve climate change before you can even focus on like poverty or anything else. The next one is, oh yeah, and like, okay, what is the problem with like time frame weighing is because a lot of people know how to do magnitude weighing. It's like pretty simple, right? My number is bigger than yours. The judge understands like, yeah, like because your number is bigger, I should probably vote for you. But a lot of people, when they do time frame weighing, they just be like, oh, my impact happens first, so you should vote for me, right? There is no reason why, like, just because your impact happens first and then their impact like happens 10 years later down the line, there's no reason why your impact is more important than theirs, right? That's why you have to do the actual weighing, which is the reason why like mine happening first is important, is because like it prereqs their case, or like, you know, it's irreversible, right? You have to explain why the time frame actually matters, whereas for things like magnitude, you don't really have to. And then on probability, So there's like 3 ways to weigh, right? So the first is like clarity of link, which is tech only. It's like how well did you extend your impact? So we talked about like extensions last week, right? You have to extend like the link chain. You have to be like, oh, this happens, then that happens, then that leads to my impact. You can't just be like, oh, on my first contention, 10 million people are going to die, so you should vote for me, right? You have to explain the whole link chain, like, oh, when we implement price controls, we can decrease drug prices, which allows people to get life-saving medication so they won't die. So, clarity of link is kind of like how well did you extend this argument throughout the round? And this is kind of like similar to debate probability too. It's kind of like how well you debated this argument in the round, right? Let's say they read 10 responses against your contention 1, like, and then you didn't respond to it, but then you just like extended your argument anyways. You were just like, yeah, but you should still vote for my argument, even though my opponents had like 10 responses to it, right? So like this clarity of link is not really there, or like this debate probability is probably like 0%. Because basically you let your opponents take out your case and you didn't really respond to it, right? And then also for debate probability, right? If they don't respond to your contention at all, then you basically have what we call like 100% probability. Like a lot of people say, I have 100% probability, even though we know it's not true, right? It's probably not 100% in the real world. But in the debate world, if they don't respond to it, they basically agree and concede to it, which means you have 100% probability of your impact. But then there's also inherent probability, right? So looking to the real world, right? You have the debate world, but you also have the real world where, if you have an impact of like a nuke war versus lifting someone out of poverty, like the chances that a nuclear war will ever happen is pretty low because most countries don't want to like nuke each other to death, right? But the chances of someone falling into poverty is like really high because, people are falling into poverty every day because of different reasons. So the inherent probability in like the real world, when we're looking at it, you also have that kind of way, and you can be like, yeah, the chance of their nuclear war impact is like so low, you should vote for our like probability of lifting people out of poverty. Okay, so does anyone have any questions on this? No? Okay, well, I'll take that as a no. So hopefully everyone remembered that, because now we're gonna do like a weighing drill. Okay, so what we're gonna do is it's gonna be like 2 versus 2, and then you're gonna have to weigh a specific impact against their impact. So to like set an example for you, me and Daniel are gonna do one first. Daniel, do you have any impacts in mind?
I'm cool with whatever. Do you have like an impact file? I think I have one. Yeah, I have an impact thing.
We don't have to read like cases for it or anything. It's just like the impact itself.
Oh yeah, just coming up with them.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Sure.
Wait, I actually do have a question.
Yeah.
So someone essentially during their entire case was just like talking about like why nuke war is going to happen, right? And like why it's probable. Like, can you just still say like, oh yeah, because nuke war is like not probable, even though they like spent the entire round just trying to say that it is probable?
Right. They can like tell you that it's like, oh, there's so much tensions, like the tensions are so high right now, we're in like another Cold War, like we literally are like trigger ready to like shoot our nukes. But you can be like, Judge, even if like this was like Cold War tensions, like what is the probability that anyone actually wants to go to war, right? Like the real world probability of a war happening is like very low. And even if you look at the link chain, because like no topics usually link directly to a nuclear war, right? It's not like the US should start a nuclear war with Japan, right? Like it's like, a lot of people use like there was this healthcare topic, like, oh, if the US implements this healthcare topic, if the US implements like free healthcare for everyone, then Trump will win the re-election in 2024. No, in 2020. Obviously Biden already won, but this was last year. So he'll win the re-election in 2020. And if he wins, he'll continue to like exacerbate tensions with other countries, which can lead to a nuclear war, which literally kills everyone on Earth, right? So the link chain itself, like the inherent probability of like passing healthcare leading to a nuclear war is very, very low. even if they try to convince you that it's really hot.
And I think you should honestly provide justifications alongside it. There's a lot of like really good ones. Like, for example, have you ever seen like movies where they like, launch nuclear weapons and they have to like, crack open like some kind of like red case or something and then write the letters down, etc. Right? We have systems like that in place in general to prevent like accidental nuclear launches or over escalation. There's also like historical precedent that nuclear launches don't happen even with like escalation. There's like a lot of reasons why nuclear war is super unlikely. And so bringing those up is generally good as well. And also, like, obviously, if you don't respond to their link chain at all, it probably gets weighted 100% probability. So you should just be putting responses on their links in the first place and then using that to weigh probability. So be like, we've given you reasons why nuclear war doesn't happen. You can weigh like, even if you don't fully buy them, the probability is still like super low because these things exist, right?
Yeah, and but that's only for like tech rounds that they'll ever give you like 100% probability, right? What you can do in lay rounds is you can pretty much
you can just BS
that
it.
like the probability is like very low because like how many nuclear wars has anyone seen in their lifetime? Like zero. Because there hasn't been one. So the probability is like really low. So did that make sense, Juliana?
Yeah.
All right. So how about me and you, Daniel? Let's do nuke war versus racism.
Versus racism? Okay.
Yeah. Which one do you want?
I mean, I'll take either.
No, which one do you want?
I'll take racism.
Okay, I'll take nuclear war. All right. Do you want to start or I can start?
You can start. Let me get some paper to flow.
Wait, so are you guys doing the impact drill?
Yeah, we're giving a demonstration of how it works.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not racism is good. It's which one is worse. Yeah.
yeah, it's comparative for the impacts. Let me. All right.
Is everyone ready? Okay, it's not gonna be like a case or anything. It's just like me asserting reasons. Okay, everyone ready? All right, then let my time begin now. The reason why a nuclear war is more important than racism is because a nuclear war can lead to extinction. Like when you send nukes into the air, they send a bunch of like soot into the atmosphere, and then like they block the sun rays, and as a result, all of our like agriculture and the crops die, which leads to like starvation. And then because of this nuclear winter, that's what scientists call it. Everyone on Earth is literally gonna die because there's gonna be no food. So the reason why this is more important than racism is because if we have a nuclear war, that essentially prereqs the impact of racism, right? Because we would tell you that like you can never solve for things like racism if literally everyone on Earth is dead, or even if you did solve for racism, the like impact doesn't really matter if everyone in the end really dies. So I would say you should probably preserve some lives over like trying to solve for racism. Yeah, that's it.
All right, dope. Cool. Wait, how long do I have to talk?
However you want, but like don't go over like 2 minutes.
I'll give a limit of 3 minutes. I'm just gonna like think of it.
Okay.
First, their evidence or their argument about nuclear war is empirically disproven. Krakatoa exploded with like 10,000 tons of smoke, putting it into the atmosphere. That means that it's actually not going to result in blocking sun rays if we have that. That's like more than a nuclear bomb is actually going to detonate and create smoke from. Second, nuclear winter is like disproven because it's reversible. It like dissipates over time. People in like island nations are going to survive it because of wind patterns. So like it doesn't actually cause extinction. Racism outweighs it anyway because cyclicality, the impact is pretty much infinite until we solve it because it's just going to lead to more violence. Second is scale, or I guess actually it doesn't really scale, doesn't really matter. Like third is because it's a prerequisite. You can't like actually solve for nuclear wars if you don't solve for racism. Wars in general are motivated by things like racial structures, which means that when we have racism existing in the first place, it leads to increased wars. Like you can look at like India and what's the other country? What's the scenario? I forgot. But yeah, you can look at like racially motivated warfare happens in the status quo. That means that nuclear war is going to happen as a result of racism in the status quo, if anything. And racism results in like more cyclical violence. So it's infinite and nuclear war survivable. Wait, what is that other country though? I completely forgot. Is it Pakistan?
Yeah, it's Pakistan. Bro, you're tripping. Okay.
Pakistan. Yeah.
All right.
I haven't debated.
Now I'll respond to Daniel's amazing speech. Okay. So first on the idea that just because there was like soup before doesn't mean there was a winter. Like there wasn't a nuclear winter, which means that my impact is probably fake. Okay, that wasn't enough soup. We're talking about like a nuclear war that like launches every single nuke in the world that we currently have. I would say that's like a precedent that you've never seen before. Obviously that's going to cause a nuclear winter. But then he tells you that like some people are going to like survive on random islands. I would say like if literally there's no sunlight on Earth because we launched all the friggin' nukes, I would say there's no chance that anyone is going to survive because no one anywhere can plant plants at all, and like we're all going to die. But then he tells you the reason to prefer racism over my impact is because his impact is like infinite because it's cyclical, right? But I would say if his is like infinity, mine is like infinity times infinity because my affects like everyone, right? If everyone goes extinct, that's like trillions and trillions and trillions of lives down the line that could have been living, but you killed just because you thought that a nuclear war wouldn't cause extinction. But so we would tell you that you should probably prefer our impact on magnitude. But then I would also say that like he tells you a prereq, right? He tells you that wars are actually motivated by racism. But I would say like there are no wars that are racially motivated, right? Like the Pakistan versus India thing, like that's a religious difference. That's not a racist, like a race difference. And I would say like most wars are caused by like money, right? Like China wants to like gain hegemony so it can like have more money for its citizens. So it wants to like fight America in a nuclear war, right? I would say that's like probably, or like Russia hates America. So and it wants like take over America. So that's why it wants to start a nuclear war. So there's like no racial reason to actually start a war. But even if you bought that, I would say that like it doesn't even lead to like a nuclear war because the differences in race aren't big enough to want like to make someone want to start a nuclear war. But like the differences between like countries and other reasons are the real reasons why we actually see nuclear wars. Yeah.
All right, wait. How many speeches? Are we just gonna do 3 speeches?
Yeah, I think so. Or
okay.
Or maybe just 2. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh no. What I mean was like, are we done, or do I have to give another speech?
Oh yeah, you have to give another speech.
Okay, dope.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go. They say that there's not enough suit that would produced by Krakatoa in order to do this, but Krakatoa literally produced like 10,000 times the size of a 1 megaton bomb. They're not going to be 10,000 nukes launched before humanity goes extinct, or the major powers at least do, because like you're literally going to kill the entire population within a couple nukes. You're not actually going to get to the point where you have enough nuclear weapons to cause this much suit. It's just a hypothetical theory. It's never actually been like proven scientifically. And they say that there's no sunlight on Earth, which means no plants, but the problem is that this relies on the suit being literally everywhere. However, wind patterns prereq or make it so that the soot doesn't actually spread evenly across the Earth, and there's areas left intact, which means that island nations can actually survive because the soot isn't going to be spread over the entire Earth, but there are going to be areas of sunlight that like are allowed to allow plants to grow, so humanity can survive in these regions. And there's literally no reason why these island nations are going to get nuked in the first place, especially if it's a war between major powers. That's not how like it works. You don't just nuke everything, you nuke your specific enemy, which means that you're not going to be seeing these areas getting nuked. You're not going to see the soot going into the atmosphere, and you're not going to be seeing nuclear winter there, which means that people survive. And then their responses to my stuff, they said that racism is infinite, or they say that it affects everyone in future generations. However, this kind of justification allows racism to perpetuate in society. We should focus on the immediate effects of racism in order to like, or we should focus on preventing racism first, because it is infinite and it goes across generations, and kind of justifications through things like nuclear war allow it to perpetuate in the first place. They say that it's in response to my prerequisite argument, they say that it's not, wars aren't racially motivated, but they're motivated by money. However, this makes nuclear war terminally non-unique, which means that we should focus on solving for racism because we can in the first place, because it is across generations and it's something that we can definitely solve for, whereas we definitely can't solve for nuclear war because they say that it's motivated by external causes like money anyway. So there's no chance that it actually like gets solved for if it's motivated by these things, which means that it's like terminally non-unique. So yeah.
Well, I think the idea is that like a nuke war happens in my world, right?
No, the idea definitely is. I think that like, you know, we're just making arguments back and forth, I guess. I think that the idea would be that nuclear war does happen.
Anyway, so you saw some impact weighing there. Oh, I wish we could have emphasized some words, but I wish you went on probability weighing, Daniel. That would have been.
Well, I thought you just said we assume that nuclear war happens.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't lead to extinction.
Oh, like probability of extinction? Wait, that's the
yeah.
defense part,
And then
isn't it?
versus like the probability of like you solving for racism, which is like guaranteed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would
That
be
was
nice.
the like solvency.
So then I can like weigh like magnitude against like probability and do some like meta weighing. But it's okay. Let's just pretend Daniel did that. Okay. So this week we'll assign impacts to y'all, and then next week, because I think it might be kind of hard for you guys to like explain why your impact is like more important than their impact. Yeah, I'm just gonna give y'all a week to prepare like an argument for the impact, and then you're gonna come next week to weigh the impact. And what I want to emphasize is that like this is a weighing drill, not like a rebuttal drill, right? So instead of like Daniel at the top, he was like, yeah, nuclear war doesn't lead to extinction, right? That's kind of like more of a response. Like he talked about like historical examples and like a rebuttal. But what we want is like what he did at the bottom, where he's like, oh, the impact of racism is like infinite because it's cyclical, so you should prefer it over like her impact, right? So we want the weighing aspect of the rebuttal, not like really the not really like the rebuttal aspect of it. So don't try like dealing stuff, you know.
Wait, isn't that just like magnitude rebuttals? Just saying that like it doesn't lead to extinction, like their magnitude weighing is wrong? Does that like not work? Like you can't respond to like their other weighing.
Wait, what?
Because like I think if you assume that nuclear war causes extinction, then the drill is kind of just like over.
No, we don't assume nuclear war causes extinction.
Wait, well then wouldn't those responses be fine?
Yeah, no, they would be fine if you weighed them like in terms of like probability.
Oh yeah, like explain the like specific.
It's not okay to just like respond and be like, yeah, no, it doesn't happen.
Or it doesn't lead to extinction.
Yeah, where it doesn't lead to extinction.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've never understood like rebuttal drills.
So like you can do rebuttals, but you have to implicate it into a way that you can weigh, right? Like if we took Daniel's responses that nuclear war doesn't lead to extinction, or like it's like a historical example that we've had sit in the atmosphere, but it hasn't led to extinction, right? If he weighed it on probability, like, oh, because we've seen historically that it hasn't happened before, the chances of extinction happening from a nuclear war is so low that you should probably prefer my impact on probability because it's like guaranteed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely didn't do the analysis on it that was necessary. I apologize.
It's okay. Okay, well, okay, I'm put a list of impacts in the chat. And when you prepare the case for the impact, you don't have to like explain like why it happens. It just happens. And then you have to like talk about the implications of it, right? So like, you know, for a nuclear war, I wouldn't have to explain like, oh, a nuclear war happens because Russia and China get angry at each other, or like because right now there's a South China Sea conflict. Like I'm just like, a nuclear war happens, and when a nuclear war happens, extinction happens or something, right? And like, for example, for Daniel, he'd be like, racism is all solved, and when racism is all solved, like blah 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 happens, right? So for y'all,
do you get to decide like which countries are at war, or is it just, are you assuming that it's a worldwide nuclear war in that case?
You just assume that it's a nuclear war between at least two countries.
Yeah, you can pick the two countries if you want. Like if you think that like something like US China or like Indo-Pac is like a uniquely like good scenario to use, like feel free to.
Yeah, like if you see a specific piece of evidence that says like if China and US were like go to a nuclear war, it would lead to extinction. Like you can use that. Or like if all racism was solved in India, like, you know, I don't know, 1 million people would be lifted out of poverty, right? Let me Give me a second to write the. So when you're debating, you can't be like, oh, their impact won't happen, right? So you can't be like, oh, racism is impossible to solve. So like, you know, so like it'll never happen, or like a nuke war is never gonna happen. But like what we are debating here is what happens if the nuke war does happen.
Wait, but you can do that in like a real debate, right?
You can't do that in a real debate, but for like the thing of this debate, which we're just trying to weigh, we're not gonna do that.
Yeah, the purposes of this debate is to emphasize like weighing. So it's less about like delinking and more about like focusing on the impact itself and how to kind of
How many people?
compare.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Need one more impact.
I have a list. What do you
I have nuke war, climate change, racism, and global recession.
If you want a fun one, you can do space colonization. That's like always a really good
But
one.
that one's like kind of hard to like.
Okay. You could do soft power. Soft power is
that
less
was
hard.
even harder to find.
How is soft power hard? Soft power is like written about all the time.
I mean, I feel like.
Wait, how about
understand, right?
How about nuclear terrorism?
But that's like nuke war. Actually,
Yeah,
you know what? Someone can just double up. Okay.
But it's terrorism. It's like different. I don't know. It is a distinct impact. Like it's actually like really different in the. It's not substantially different in the way you weigh it, but it's a really different impact because it has like different scenarios, I guess.
Yeah, the link chain is different, but it's like the same impact if anyone wants to have an impact in nuclear. Okay, so here are the 4. What was I gonna say? The 4 impacts, right? So, who wants nuclear war?
Wait, hold up. How would a global recession happen?
It just happens.
That's what the drill is. The assumption is that it would happen.
No, but like what would happen in a global recession, right? Because I mean, like at least
that's what you have to find out,
right? No, but like
you can like find evidence says that like there's this piece of evidence that says a global recession pushes 900 million people into poverty.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like collapses of like international currency or things that would lead to like global recession, stuff like that.
I guess so, but like if there was a global recession, I mean, like anyone who has anything like food, I guess like at least like food would be of like really high value, right? So
Right.
then like if they sell their food, like if someone has like a lot of crops, right, like they can just sell it out and then, they'll become rich, right? So like what happens in like a global recession? Like poverty? Like, well, I guess so.
Yeah,
but,
that's kind of up to you, right? Like that's the point of this. So that's why we're giving you a week to prepare to find like the worst impacts that you can find off of global recession. Like maybe a global recession leads like more terrorism, right? Like that's up to you to find, right? Like you're the one who has to find the link chain. So it's like on net a global recession is bad.
Wait,
I mean, is everyone going to like die of like starvation? Because like that's kind of impossible, right?
you have to figure it out, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you have to find evidence and research it, right? Like the nuke war, like I was talking about nuclear winter. Like I didn't just make that up like off the top of my head. Like there's actually a literature about it that says like, oh, a nuclear war would lead to like extinction because of nuclear winter, right?
Yeah, and it's all
so
incorrect.
your like challenge is to try to find the implications of these impacts, right? So what happens when racism is solved? Do all minorities get lifted out of poverty, right? What happens?
Also, one thing that's super interesting to look into, I guess, as a side note, is like the idea that like nuclear war causes extinction is like a very debate-centric thing. Like most literature kind of contradicts that. So looking into that more is something very interesting to do. Because you kind of just like assume it, but it's like really, really weird to like think about it.
Wait, can you repeat what you just said? My computer lagged.
Oh yeah, no, it's just interesting to like research whether nuclear war actually causes extinction or not, because it like kind of doesn't, but most people in debate like just kind of de facto think it does. It's something that I was really surprised by personally. So looking into that, if you're like planning on going against someone who's running nuclear war, is really interesting.
Oh, is that why you had all those rebuttals?
Well, yeah, I mean, like it's like the most common impact in LD, aside from climate change. So it's just like you kind of have them off the top of your head almost. Like I know, like the Krakatoa example is from a card called Nyquist 99. I forgot what the Island Nations one is from, but there's like a lot of cards that say that it's just not true because it really kind of isn't.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, as I was saying, does anyone want nuclear war?
I might take it, or global recession, or climate change, but I'm not sure yet.
Okay. I think someone else said they wanted it. Was that Daniel Faith?
No, I was just saying I want a nuclear war.
You want a nuclear war, but I'm saying, do you want to argue for?
No, I just won't.
Okay. Racism. Oh my God, John Gunn left. Oh, we are on time, but racism. Does anyone want racism?
Yeah, who